Hello, welcome along everybody to another one of these Fotospeed chats, and myself and Tim are very happy to be joined by the fantastic Jack Perks with us today. Jack, how are you doing?
I'm good, Sam, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah. We're all dotted around the country, and this is obviously the joys of digital technology these days, as we well know, allowing us to do these chats. And Jack, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm sure you do, he's a professional photographer, especially working in the natural history side of things. Many of you might have seen his work on fish, freshwater fish, but he does lots of other things, underwater things and wildlife photography, and also some campaigning, some podcasts, some chatting. He does everything. And I think that's probably a neat place to start, Jack. We might develop that theme more, but you trained originally, didn't you? Did your degree down in Falmouth. That was a photography degree. Is that right? Can you tell us a little bit more about how you kind of came to choose that, and maybe how that's molded and formed your pathway from there?
Yeah, so I did a degree in marine and natural history photography, so quite specialist. That was 10 years ago now, so I'm getting on a bit. I'm getting long in the tooth. And yeah, it was a good course. It's the only course in Europe, so it wasn't a long list of places. It was basically go to uni or go traveling. So the uni said yes, so that kind of solidified that fate for me. I loved it. I mean, I really enjoyed doing the degree. There was lots of aspects of it that appealed to me, like the marine side, because obviously I'm now pretty much an underwater photographer, so that was really interesting for me. Living in Cornwall, because I'm born and bred in Nottingham, so the sea was a rumour. Really, I'd never seen much of it. So living on the coast was phenomenal. I absolutely loved that. And I think without going down the rabbit hole, I don't think you have to have a degree to succeed in photography, but it worked for me just because it kept me focused for 3 years.
Yeah, I think that's it. That is that chance to really explore the passion, isn't it? So, I mean, as you mentioned, the sea was something of a rumour from a lad that grew up in Nottingham. There must have been this love of fish, underwater things. Did that come from holidays and rock pooling and picking up bits and just being obsessed, or was there a history of that in the family? Or how do we go from the lad in Nottingham to flaunting around the coast of Cornwall accordingly?
Well, I suppose I've always, it's so cliche to say this, but I've always been interested in wildlife and nature and whatnot. And whether it was jumping in a river, looking for sticklebacks and frogs and stuff, or if we were on holiday, rock pooling. So I think it's that physical connection, like finding animals. I just like getting my hands. I was feral as a child. So be up a tree or be in a ditch or something. I guess my generation, like growing up in the 90s, Steve Irwin was like the hero. He was the man. And obviously you wouldn't really get it now. He'd be, be chucked off, but he'd jump on a crocodile, like, not quite that extreme in the UK, obviously finding a newt or something in the garden, but that sort of, that vein of thought, finding animals and getting close to them. That's what really interested me.
So, Tim, I know you've been involved in photography in higher education as well. I mean, what are your thoughts vis-a-vis sort of Jack's setup and just having the time for people to develop their photography by just having that focus for a number of years on just working heavy duty on that? I mean, Tim, what do you think?
No, I think it's, I don't think you can kind of replicate it really. I think it is just kind of, you need that time. I've just graduated from Falmouth myself, and I just wondered if Jack could tell me what it's like, because I haven't actually been to the campus yet, so I did it remotely, which is very strange.
Really?
Yeah, I did the masters, so I was remote, and it was. I've never been to Falmouth, which is sad.
That's a shame. Yeah, it's a great place. I was there 2 days ago. I was down
fantastic.
there for my stag do. So it was.
Wow.
It was, it's a lovely place, definitely.
Yeah. No, I think it really does focus you, doesn't it? I think if you're in that time and in that time, you kind of just, you just get focused, and you can, I think what I found is when you leave, it's kind of trying to keep that intensity of producing the work up. I think that's the trick. If you can do that, I think you're not far off, I think.
Well, they had millions of pounds worth of equipment. I mean, ridiculous. And if you're, a student, you're salivating over all these long lenses and all the kit that you could never afford at the time. And obviously, you can use it whenever you want. So there's that. And I guess the other thing is there's structure as well. And then once you leave uni, there's this existential crisis of a black hole of what the hell are you going to do with your life? But at least with university, you've got 3 years. Like, okay, this is what I'm doing. So yeah, some people thrive on that, and other people just I don't know, fall down and crash.
Fall in a hole. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned there some of the gear, and I know some of the. I've spoke to a couple of other people who've been through that course, and they've gone on to do documentary photography in some of the, things we see on the BBC and Netflix and all the rest of it. And we touched on the fact there that when you come out, what happens next? I suppose maybe that time allowed you to really focus on what you wanted to do was more of that underwater work. But how do you then go from that transition from out of uni to, I've seen you on the BBC, I've seen you on all sorts of things now, and you've kind of cemented your place. That's maybe taken a number of years. But what did that journey look like, and what sort of tips would you give to anyone, or advice to really find your niche, or how to actually turn it into money, I suppose, as well, without being too lurid?
Well, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? And I'm not going to tell anyone because I'm going to ruin my career. No, it's tough, isn't it? And yeah, I mean, obviously, if it was easy, we'd all do it, wouldn't we? So it's going to be different for everyone. There's no clear career path that's going to work for everyone. There'll be some people who fall out of uni and they get a job straight away, and just the circumstances work in their favor. There'll be other people it might take 10 years before they do it, And I think for me personally, I'm quite a driven person. I don't wait for things to happen. I make things happen without sounding like a motivational speaker. So I'll try and get things done. And I moved back home. So I was living with my mum when I left uni. So obviously that kept costs down. I did have a job for a while working, ironically, processing photos at Boots. So I used to be in the developing room looking at, all these 6x4 crappy holiday snaps. But I used to develop those. And then, so that had money trickling in. But it was a night shift. So it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon till 12 at night, which meant I had the day to still take my own pictures. So that suited me absolutely fine. So that helped massively. And then I would say it got to about 3.5 years in, and the scales were starting to tip where I was making as enough money that I could sack in Boots and then go full time. But again, that's what worked for me. It might not work for someone else. There's no clear career path, and I guess that's what makes being a freelance photographer so incredibly interesting, I guess, and terrifying.
The second word especially. How I touched on at the top. You do a variety of things, and we've seen you, being on TV shows. We've seen you in print. We've seen, we do prints for you, and you sell prints. And you do a lot of video work as well, and then you've got your YouTube channel, which people can check out as well. So do you think it's sort of a prerequisite now that a creative or any sort of person in this world needs to be able to handle a variety of different skills from that side of things?
It's a really interesting topic, isn't it? And I think that, 20, 30 years ago, the days of where, I'm just this photographer, I'm just a wedding photographer, or I only make my money from stock, or I only make my money from books, they're gone. We're in a multimedia age now. And I think you've got to be able to just do a little bit of everything. And some of it you might not enjoy quite as much as the other things. But, have as many feathers in your cap, basically. So I try and do as many different things as I can. And it works for me, and I've not found there are certain things I'd like to make more money on than others, but life doesn't always work out that way. So I think, the more skills you have, the more versatile and employable you are, I suppose. So there are more traditional ways, I guess, like selling prints and doing talks and books. But then there are the newer ways, like selling stuff through Instagram or even what is it, NFTs and NFT? I haven't got a bloody clue what they are, but I'm told they're good. So there's stuff like that.
No, I think you're right. I think that's what digital's brought, hasn't it? It's kind of it's opened up photography, good or bad. And but like you said, it's opened up photography to everyone. But you've got to do workshops on things. You've got to sell prints. You've got to do books. You've got to do talks. It's kind of, you've got to do a bit of everything now to kind of, like you said, gone are those days where you could just live off your print sales or something. Those days. Well, for some anyway, they've gone. But
I mean, and some. I mean, if anything, as well, it's almost opened up prints, hasn't it? Because like fine art prints and stuff like that. So you're appealing to a much wider audience. And I think, without sounding too brutal, the cream rises to the top. So I think maybe back in the day when someone maybe just knew someone and they could get their images in. You're only really going to get there now if you are pushing boundaries or you are taking those better images, because let's face it, everyone's a photographer. Everyone's got a camera. iPhones can do some cracking stuff. I think at Fotospeed, you've done prints from phones, haven't you? And
Yeah.
like you can, they can. How big? Just out of personal interest, how big can, say, someone on an iPhone, if they wanted to blow it up, how big could they go?
Without any kind of messing around with it, straight off the camera, probably about an A3. I think you could get quite happily.
Yeah.
Any bigger
Even
than that,
bigger
you
on the new
might.
ones.
Yeah, I mean, on the pros and things, you probably go a bit bigger, to be honest. A3 plus A2. But you can do some little things and enlarge them and stuff in Photoshop. You probably get them a bit bigger. But yeah, these new ones are cracking. I've just got a new phone actually, and I think actually it's just cracking. It's just brilliant.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, exactly. I never like kind of promoting Apple, but it is great.
Exactly. But I think what's interesting, and maybe this would be a neat time to have some of the images. We can have a quick chat, because there are obviously unique challenges, and maybe Tim, actually, sorry, if we can have a quick look at a couple of the underwater images actually first, that'd be fab.
Yeah,
because we're talking there a little bit about tech, and I think we've talked about a little bit tech, and we're going to talk about that more, and the finances of money. But I think fundamentally, what I really want to get across in this is your love of your subject matter absolutely comes bounding through. I've seen you talk before. I've seen bits and bobs that you've done, and I think what makes me engage with you and your work is seeing your passion for it. And I think fundamentally that has to come first, right? But I suppose I'm intrigued as someone who doesn't work in this world to understand some of your technical challenges of working in these physical environments, standing in cold water. Where the hell do you start for an outset? And then are there technical challenges of using the equipment? So I think it might be interesting, because we're having our focus on wildlife in May. And I wonder if people out there watching and who've seen your work might struggle with some of these things. Can you give us, as much as you can in a short period, a kind of insight into some of those challenges and how you overcome those, technically and physically?
Yeah. So underwater photography is just a whole nother world and a whole set of challenges. So there's no such thing as cheap underwater photography. Unfortunately, it is going to break the bank balance, but it is so rewarding. And I think from a commercial point of view, because there's less people doing it, there's a little bit more avenue. But at the same time, how many people want a salmon on the wall, or how many people want, I mean, I don't mind it. I like a salmon on my wall. So there is that aspect. But there's no such thing really as an underwater camera. You have a housing that goes around the camera. So you can get splash-proof cameras, but generally speaking, for SLRs, for mirrorless cameras, you've got a casing around it. And the casing very often is twice the cost of the camera, if not more. And then you've got all the other accessories and toys and all that sort of stuff. But each button on the casing corresponds to the camera. So you're not limited underwater in terms of accessing the camera. The only thing that limits you is obviously you can't change your lens underwater. You have to stick with your lens choice. So there's a lot more planning involved. Obviously, if you're on land, you can just change your lens. Underwater, you have to kind of commit to what you're using. So there's a bit more of that aspect of it. And also just things like conditions. You're losing light the deeper that you go. You have to think about the clarity of the water. Here in the UK, we do have some rivers that are clear, but not many now. So there's so many challenges that it faces. So when someone does come out with a slightly better image, it's hard fought, it's hard won. And there's a definite kind of satisfaction to getting those, because they can be bloody tricky sometimes.
Yeah.
And are you, I mean, there's so many things I could pick up on here, but I mean, in terms of a more compelling image or successful image, difficult words we both know.
Yeah.
Is that driven by the reason you're there? So, for example, if you're working with an agency that's wanting to promote conservation or something else, I would imagine, obviously, what you're wanting to show in situ is going to vary versus if you're working for someone else. So, how do those sorts of things affect, what makes a compelling underwater image?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, most of my work now is commission based, so I don't actually get to take much that I want to take. I'd love to, if somewhere down the line I get a couple extra coppers, I'd love to just spend a month and do my own stuff. I shouldn't moan about working. That's a good thing. But it does change with each commission that you get. So, for example, I did a job for Greenpeace a couple of years ago, and that was plastics in rivers. So it's not something that I would personally shoot because, I want to photograph animals in a nice environment. But they purposely wanted me to photograph birds with nests full of plastic, or in this case, plastic bags going past fish and things like that. So it's tough because you need to show those difficult images, showing those kind of darker sides of the environment, really.
You mentioned if you had your own time. So what would you do? How would that vary? I know the plastics is a very particular example, but let's say we said to you, right, Jack, we've sorted it out. We're going to pay you to just go and do 2 weeks of whatever you want. We don't care what you come back with.
Cheers,
by the way, this is not a legal offer.
No, it is. We're recording. I've got this.
You know what I mean? What would you do? Where would you go? And why? What would be motivating that for you, both aesthetically and subject matter wise?
I guess it would be trying to take pictures that others haven't done or haven't done to what I would think is the kind of upper limits of that. Because I've basically got a million and one ideas all rolling around my head, but it's just I can't justify spending a month on one image when I know that's probably what I would need to do to get the image that I want to do, but my bank balance would suffer from that. So yeah, it would basically be just pre-planning an image. So if I pick something out the top of my head, let's say a split level shot of a water vole diving in or something like that. Because I thought, I haven't really seen something like that before. I'd love to do it, but I just know I'm going to need to put the time in that, scout it all out. And it would be a great image. And it's one of those images, it's almost like, we talked about the digital stuff earlier. It's almost the shame of living in a digital age, because let's say I spend 2 months or a month on that image. I then put it on Instagram and say people go mad about it, and then it's forgotten the next day. And you think, bloody hell, you've spent all that time for it to just be, slided away for a cat snoring or something, whatever the next big thing is. So it does kind of, it almost makes me not want to spend all that time, because then what's the point? But I would like to anyway. I'm not that self-defeatist, but that's my process.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's fair enough. Well, we can't give you the 2 weeks anyway, so it's kind of by the by. But if I was just interested, kind of what drove you still, and I think when I do talk to a lot of the wildlife photographers, a lot of it comes down to finding ways to re-present species or to connect with species that are harder to find or that we don't know as much about. And I'm just intrigued by what drives them, because as we go on, and you do other work for other people, it's really difficult to keep up your own work and keep up your own inspiration like that. And it's a struggle I'm sure many people who are involved in this side of things get on with. But if we take a look at this particular image, Jack, I don't know. That's the point. You tell me everything here. But these moments, when we see them on the image, I know how much work will have gone into this, or I'm guessing how much work of looking, finding, waiting. He's going to tell me he just dropped in and it happened in 2 minutes now. But you know what I mean? There's so much work I know goes on in the background. So maybe just use this one as an example to kind of allude to some of that background work.
Well, yeah, no, this is the perfect one. So basically, I've been wanting to do a split level shot of a frog for years and years and years. And I just hadn't found it sounds so sad. Hadn't found the right pond or the right frogs and I was in the Peak District, and ironically in a place called Frogget, and there was a little spring-fed pond. So it was gin clear, it was really shallow. The frogs were spawning, and this is using a remote camera. So I've got the camera in the housing. I've put it to where I think is about right. I've got a cable coming out of the camera, and that hooks into my laptop, and then I'm triggering it from the laptop. And I've also got, I don't use flash very often. I don't have a problem with flash. I just don't use it very often. But in this case, it was a fairly overcast day, and I just wanted to illuminate the water. So I've got a flash gun above the top of the water here, just to lift those colours. And this maybe took, I don't know, within half an hour and an hour for the frogs to come back and feel comfortable, I was able to get this shot. But it's a process that probably took 4 years in the making, in that I came up with the idea and tried it, didn't work. Second year, tried it somewhere else, it didn't work. So, 4 years for one image, essentially. I mean, if you boiled it down, it's maybe 2 weeks, because frogs only spawn for a couple of days. But it's a waiting game. You've got to be patient for these things, because 1 year it might not work, or 1 year the pond might not even be there. There's so many factors into trying to get those images, and then eventually when you get it, it's just worth all that time and expense, really.
I think that's the thing, isn't it, with like nature and wildlife photography? You've got to be really patient. I was never that patient, I'm afraid, but you've got to accept that things take time and they won't work. You'll go there. You could spend, I imagine you could spend 3-4 hours in that location quite easily and not get anything.
Oh, massively. I've done, I went to try and do golden eagles in Skye a few years ago, and I was in a hide for 12 hours and we didn't get anything. So, and, that's not unusual. And yeah, I tend to work on a, not even a weekly or a monthly plan, but it is literally a yearly plan. I'll be like, right, I'm going to have a go at this. And I know this window for opportunities, maybe only a week. And if it doesn't work this year, I'll have to have a go next year. And then the year after that. And some years you're busy that week, it might be a partner's wedding or something. So you can't do a partner's wedding.
Yeah. You got problems if that's going
on. Birthday or whatever, some family thing. So it can literally take years just to get, one image. It's madness, really.
Jack, can we touch a little bit about the sort of crossover between how images can be used from a conservational point of view or to promote conservation? I think I would imagine that's something that best or is most powerful when you're working alongside an agency or a charity I think what I'm really asking is, do you think that the images you can make and the videos you might make can play a really important role in educating and informing from a conservational point of view?
I mean, I don't like to be too big-headed, but I like to think that some of the images can have power, and certainly on a TV level, look at Blue Planet. That was they called it the Blue Planet effect with plastics, but prior to that wasn't as big an issue, whereas now it has changed massively. So I think if you do get the right image, it can be very powerful and it can change opinions on certain things, particularly if it's a motive, whether that animal is suffering or something like that, or even an animal, showing empathy or whatnot, or emotion. So yeah, I think images do have that potential power, but it's getting them is tricky. It's not like you just walk outside, you see those sort of things. They're going to take time to get, but certainly with conservation, it can be something good to try and get in those images.
I think the other thing we just got a few of the other images here, Jack, and we've got some that aren't underwater, some wildlife images generally. So what motivates you on your choice of subject matter? We know you've got huge excitement for the underwater stuff, and you did document all the British freshwater fish, and that was a thing that took a number of years. I can well imagine, and I think we've made clear how that could be in the last few minutes talking about it. But what now motivates you in terms of going forward and looking at other types of wildlife subject matters?
Well, this dragonfly that's on now, so that was just taken in my garden. So I'm an old man before my time. I love gardening, so I've tried to turn my garden into a bit of a mini nature reserve. So I've got 6 ponds. I'm running out of lawn in my garden. I've got like a little wildflower meadow. I've got all that sort of stuff. And what's lovely, I've only been in this house 2 years now, but each year more and more wildlife comes in. And I'll just be sat having a cup of tea in the kitchen, and I'll see something and I'll rush out and photograph it. And it's a lovely way to take pictures because I haven't got to go very far. So this dragonfly was laying eggs. That's what it's doing. You can see it's the back of it just laying eggs on the wood. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. I've never seen that before. Got the macro lens and was able to get really close to it. So you are starting to see things close to home. So I'm trying to appreciate things. And I guess lockdown did this for a lot of us, appreciate what's closer to home. Because I love working all over the country and working abroad. It's fantastic to do that. But I don't think you should overlook, what's in your garden, what's in your local park, what's in your local nature reserve. Because at the end of the day, that's going to be massively more accessible to you. So with a lot of the topside stuff that I'm doing, I really enjoy getting the macro lens. I mean, your garden's like a mini Serengeti. There's so much happening in your garden. There'll be trials and tribulations and all kinds of amazing things. You just need to get the magnifying glass out and kind of have a look between the bushes, and you'll be amazed what you'll find.
I was going to say, is that important to you to kind of stay within the UK and have those kind of links with the UK and the nature and things going on in the UK more than abroad? Or if someone, obviously, I imagine if someone gave you a trip to wherever and off you went, I'm sure you'd take it. But it sounds like it's important in the UK.
Oh, massively. So I've done a couple of bits abroad, and I'm not allowed to say where, but I have got a very big trip coming up in August. So I'm a complete hypocrite. But
wow.
I love working in the UK. I think we've got so much wildlife in the UK that if I never went abroad again, I'd be happy, and I've got lots here. So I'd love to go to all the 4 corners of the world, but the UK is incredibly rich with our coastline, with our farmland, with our urban areas. We've got so much to cover. So yeah, I love it. And obviously, it's a little bit greener as well if you want to go down that route. So yeah, I do like working in the UK, definitely.
Yeah, good.
We've touched on a couple of different types of images here, and obviously with Fotospeed, we want to talk a little bit about printing because that's what we do.
Yeah.
And I know, I don't want to get into a deep dive on the tech. So what I'm really interested in with you is how people react when you share prints or when they buy prints, or whoever it might be that an agency that's used you, be that a charity, be that's an individual, because we have talked about the digital media, but we obviously believe in the print form, and I know you do too. So how have you experienced that with people tangibly having prints of these amazing scenes, especially on such small scales or in worlds we don't go into and we don't see? How have you found people react to that, and is that important to you?
So it's interesting that we talked about, when I said earlier about you'll look at an image you've spent a lot of time on and just kind of swipe it away. With prints, there seems to be more staying power, whether that's because they buy it as a print, it's on their wall, or if you go to an exhibition, there just seems to be more of a pause. Like if you've got, and I don't do many exhibitions, but when I do them, people just spend the time to look at every nook and cranny when it's a physical print. Whereas when it's a small bit on your phone, it's like, oh, that's cool, like, boom, gone. Whereas I just think it stays in your mind more. People kind of think more about it when they see that there in front of them. And if they're going to buy a print, when they can tangibly pick that up, there is that sort of connection between you, the photographer, and the print. So I think it's important to have that still, definitely.
I always think, especially with digital, I always say to people, it's the print. It brings it back into the real in a way, because you're clicking the button and it goes into these ones and zeros, or in the old days, a bit of film, but it needs to be brought back into the physical and something you can hold and touch maybe. And it gives you that link. It gives that viewer back. It's something they can hold, isn't there? Or they can look at on the wall. It's something physical in front of them. If you're just flicking through, that's something else. I always say, kind of. I won't get too into the theory of it, but yeah, it's something else on a phone, I think. But the print.
No, I agree, Tim. No, definitely, because I've got. Obviously, like behind me now, there's like prints that you very kindly did for me, and yeah, they all. People always comment if they. Not that many people come into my office, but when they do, it's one of the first things that they notice. And I think if I had an image on my laptop, they might mention it, but there's just something about them being there. It just sticks in people's minds more, I think, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm always intrigued by the scale situation as well, because if you're dealing with macro images, we might be dealing with something which is, this small, and then we print it at A2. You know what I mean? Your engagement with that as the viewer, suddenly you're blowing this world up, which they'd never seen before, or which they knew happened in the macro scale. So I'm always intrigued. I don't really have a question here, Jack, sorry, but I'm just looking to riff off you. But this idea of scale, because if we talk about printing landscapes, you might be printing a vista which is a mile wide and you're printing it on A3, right? And we know in the world that landscape is huge, whereas you're talking about taking something completely the other way around, and it is tiny, but we're printing it way bigger than it is. So I just think that's an intriguing thing for people to engage in visually.
Well, I suppose, how many of us grab a snail and go, and get really close and look at it. So when you have got these macro subjects or the underwater subjects, and you do see all the intricate detail, whether it's the scales, whether it's the color. One of the things that always gets me is when people go, I didn't realize they were so colorful, when they look at fish or when they look at some of these smaller subjects. I've got a picture of a crane fly, and its eyes like emerald green. It's absolutely stunning. But because crane flies, they're just buzzing around your lawn, no one really takes the time to look at them. So many of these animals have got amazing patterns and details, and prints are a fantastic way to kind of show that off, because you're getting to see it, in the physical world in a more intricate way.
Yeah, absolutely. So last couple of thoughts, and thanks for giving us some time, Jack, because I know you'd prefer to be out with your face in the pond or something.
Yeah, I'm dying to get out there.
One thing that I think, I've had a good look at your work, and I've known about what you've been doing for a number of years, albeit we operate kind of in different fields, so to speak. It's interesting because I'm really, like I say, I'm always engaged when I know it's someone who absolutely is passionate about what they're doing. And I think that absolutely transmits to the work people put out. I would say, just from a purely aesthetic point of view, your images are extremely natural in how they're shot and presented. And I would imagine, but this is really what I'm asking, when you're dealing with, if you're out on a thing for Greenpeace or whoever it might be, there needs to be an integrity to the shot and how it's taken. So in terms of your working practice as a photographer, but also in terms of, say, the editing and the presentation of the image as well. So how important is that for you, and how does it inform basically how you're working in the field in terms of your care and how important that is? And then also from an editing point of view, delivering images which are as natural and as close to natural as they can possibly be.
I think with wildlife photography, probably more so than any other kind of photography, you are trying to show it how it was. Like with, I don't know, if it's portrait photography, then you can add a flair of surrealism to it. And even with landscape photography, often how the end image ends up is not what you saw on the day. There is a lot of editing, and that's just kind of accepted in that world. But with wildlife photography, generally speaking, you want to show a true representation of what that animal is and what it's all about. So you're obviously being very careful not to disturb the animal and not to alter their behavior from that ethical point of view. But then when you do get it into the laptop, most wildlife photographers would generally do very minimalist edit. I kind of call it darkroom editing. If you could do it in a darkroom in the old days, that's kind of what you stick to now. So a bit of dodging, a bit of burning. I'm not so much of a cloning snob. Like a little bit of cloning, a tiny bit is fine. I'm not going to be putting party hats and, 2 heads on these things. But, if it's just going to improve it a bit, I'm happy to do that. But I think, minimalist is probably the way to go, and just to show it how you saw it when you were there on the day.
Yeah, and I would imagine in some of those underwater situations, it's very busy down there, as you alluded to, and the colour situation. But you have to kind of accurately represent that, I suppose, because there will be aficionados as well who know all about the wildlife, and it has to be what it is, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, with when you dive, you lose colours. So once you go below 5 meters, there's no red and things like that. So you have to kind of put into colour correction or use flash to bring those colours back. So there's all stuff like that. And, you get another thing called backscatter. So that's where there's like sand and dirt that can rock up. So again, like you could clone it all out, but it will take ages to do. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff like that you have to think about.
All these things. I didn't think about it. The deeper you go, the less you see. Hadn't occurred to me.
Once you get to about 30 meters, it's just blue. Everything's blue. So, when you watch those documentaries, like, isn't it blue? Well, yeah, that's because that's the only color that you can get down there. You can use a light to bring some of it back. But yeah, the deeper you go, the more colors you lose. There is, I can't remember the name of the scale, but there's a scale where you can look and lose it all.
Cool.
Amazing.
Well, listen, Jack, just as we wrap up, I'm not going to ask you about that particular trip because I know that's under wraps, but what do you have on your sort of radar? Not necessarily practically, but what are some of your goals? You're obviously, like you mentioned, you're a driven sort of chap. I know you're super passionate about the subject matter, which I think is fab. What are some of your goals and aims moving forward, or big wishes that you'd like to do more of professionally and just photographically, if you can?
Yeah, so from a personal point of view, I mean, what we talked about earlier, I would love to just spend some time doing my own stuff, and somewhere down the line I will. Like I say, I'm a patient guy. I'll get if it takes 10 years, I'll do it in 10 years. Somewhere down the line, I would love to just maybe put a little bit of money away and just do some photography for myself. I'd love to kind of get stuck into that. But in terms of projects and stuff, I'm currently working on a film called Britain's Hidden Fishes, and Fotospeed helped out with that. Actually, you kind of donated some prints to that, which went down really well. So that's filming all this year, and then we're hoping for a release next year. And that's basically, I'm styling it as Blue Planet on a budget. So we haven't quite got got their money, but we raised 38,000, which that's
amazing.
It sounds like a lot, but for a wildlife documentary, it's a fart in the wind. It's not a huge amount, but it's still enough to make something I think is going to be really special, and get that out next year, hopefully, just to show people what we've got living in our rivers and around the seas in the UK.
Cool. Sounds amazing.
Good man. Well, listen, Jack, always a pleasure to chat. And if everyone, you can find Jack on all the usual places on the internet, but check out his YouTube channel as well. There's lots of cool stuff on there, and your website. And quick plug for the podcast, Jack, if you want.
Yeah, if you've enjoyed listening to me waffle for half an hour, you can listen to me waffling even more. And that's the Bearded Tits podcast, which is on Spotify, iTunes, and I interview photographers, wildlife presenters, and we just talk rubbish for an hour. Really, it's quite I would say it's good. I'm a bit biased, but hopefully
No,
people
it's
like
good. It's
No,
good.
Vince in the office swears by it, so he's
Vince has been on. Vince was on it.
Yeah,
There you go. There you go.
that's probably why he swears by it.
Go and find that episode, everybody. Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, all the best, and it's great seeing your work. And obviously, we enjoy doing stuff with you for Fotospeed, and we appreciate you giving us some time. And have a fab rest of the year. And I hope you get some of your own work done at some point as well.
Cheers. No, thanks for asking me on, Sam and Tim. It's always good to have a natter, and thank you for supporting me, because it means the world to me, and I love working with you guys. So
thank you. It's been great.
Great stuff.
Cheers, Jack.
Right.
Take care, mate. Thanks a lot.
Bye.